Hello and welcome to the Gracie Gatto podcast. I'm Gracie Gatto, minus the rest of the Agents of Chaos. I started this podcast because I noticed a real vacuum in news in New Hampshire. The news gatekeepers, and with that comes censorship. It's the same circles that regurgitate the same talking points over and over again without really checking sources. In New England, if you went to elementary school with so-and-so, and he said it happened, then it happened. Hey, Joey said it happened, so it happened. That's called a New England sewing circle, not journalism. There have been recent character attacks on City Councilor Stacey Brown, Representative Ellen Reed, and Claire Best, and myself. Now I'm here to set the record straight. Yes, it's no secret I had a 10-part docuseries about New Hampshire corruption in pre-production. It's no secret. I worked with Claire Best on securing financing for the film. During that time, I went through a personal rough patch and had filed for divorce over claims of domestic violence. I reached out to Amanda Grady Sexton over at the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. I had sent a tweet in broad daylight, firing off my signal for help. Amanda said, "Give up, Claire, and I can help you." And she also said, "I hope Claire gets the help she needs." I didn't know at the time Amanda Grady Sexton was the center of focus of some key stories we were working on for the series. So when I said no, every door seemed to have slapped in my face. Like, slammed in my face in the state of New Hampshire. The things that should have been easy were not. And I don't think it's a coincidence. So let's talk about the shitty journalism in New Hampshire. Stacey Brown, Concord City Councilor Stacey Brown, and founding member of the Agents of Chaos. Stacey Brown had flagged Damian Fisher over at the New Hampshire Journal. So New Hampshire Journal sounds like a reputable publication, but they constantly get the facts wrong. Damian Fisher has written hit pieces on all of us, but the extra nastiness seems to be really reserved for Stacey. I have an email here that was sent to Damian Fisher from Stacey Brown alerting him of alleged misappropriation of funds. Here's a clip of that. An actual email. Of that actual email. Check it out. Instead of following through with a lead, he wants dirt on Claire Best. Now, Claire Best is a television agent and a critic of the public affairs director, Amanda Grady Sexton. Yeah, that name keeps coming up in our research, but more on that later. Let's let that sink in. So, Stacey Brown brings up possible corruption, alleged. Damian Fisher is like, yeah. So what's your connection to Claire Best? What the fuck, right? Now, let's switch gears and talk about the life cycle of a narrative. So let me explain how this happens. So now that we've talked about the tools, let's talk about the process. Because media manipulation doesn't just happen randomly. It follows a life cycle, a pattern, almost like a script. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So according to research in data journalism and disinformation tracking, media manipulation tends to move through stages. Stage one is seeding the story. So every narrative starts somewhere. A post, a whisper, a tip, an accusation. It doesn't need to be proven. It just needs to exist. Now, sometimes it's vague. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's personal. But the goal isn't clarity. The goal is ignition. Now, in a small state like New Hampshire, that seed doesn't fall far. Now, stage two is amplification. Next, the story gets picked up, repeated, shared, not necessarily verified, just circulated. And here's the trick: the more it's repeated, the more it starts to feel real. Familiarity becomes credibility. And suddenly, people aren't asking, is this true? They're asking, why am I hearing this everywhere? So let's talk about Representative Ellen Reed. She had been in contact with the New Hampshire Journal, and Damien Fisher, again, got it all wrong. Now, he writes like it's gospel about House Bill 1675, and I can't stress how important local news journalists is for them to take the time to Google. Just Google. It's not hard to check your sources. So let's get back to the New Hampshire gatekeepers. So do you ever wonder why some stories don't leave the state? And that's unless they wanted to. So let's get into it. Now, who are the players? We have Howard Alschuler. He's the head of the New Hampshire Press Association, or was head. 26. He's ahead of 26 publications. Married to Deborah Altshuler. She runs Haven. She's a state rep, now senator, who receives straw donations from the New Hampshire Coalition via the J. Grumbilis Strategic Solutions for her 2024 state campaign. Then we have Amanda Grady Sexton, again, married to WMUR's political director, Adam Sexton. So it's all one big circle jerk. Sunshine Week, or Shadows. So speaking of what the fuck, this week is Sunshine Week. Sunshine Week is supposed to be about transparency, accountability, and the public's right to know. Instead, we get a Zoom call of journalists from In-Depth News talking about right to know. Check this out.
Next up, I have Damien Fisher. If you would be so kind to tell us how you've used the law in your reporting, and from a reporter's what was the first time you filed a right to know request, and what did you learn from that first time when you did that?
Oh gosh, I I can't remember the first time I filed a right to know request.
Long time
I
ago,
think
huh?
a long time ago, I had an editor walk me through it. I think we may have had a seminar or a class or something. Um, you learn most by doing it. I do recall fairly early in my career reading the relevant portions of the right to know request to Board of Selectmen at their meeting because they weren't handing over payment information, which they had to do. So I had to go and tell them, no, you have to. Um, you have to know when to push. But I agree uh, a lot with Nancy. I'm sort of at I'm resigned to no one actually following the law. And that puts me in a position like Paula and Gary, where you've got to have a certain amount of relationship building and flexibility because every community is different, every agency is different. No one really follows the set rules because, and if no one's enforcing them, there are no rules. So you've got to be social enough and flexible enough because at the end of the day, is it more important that some town clerk in a town of 100 people follows the right to know law or that you get the information? You've got to make that decision. So also like Nancy, every once in a while I will get a right to know response that I completely forgotten that I had filed because it's months old, and it's like Christmas every day. It's great. You've got to be flexible because it's I don't know if it's possible to enforce these rules on everybody. We don't have any mechanism. The ombudsman was never going to be it. I think in Massachusetts you can appeal a right to know dispute to the Secretary of State. It's built into the Secretary of State's function. I don't know why we don't do that here, but we don't, and it's up to you to actually enforce the law, like Lori has had to with sort of the worst case scenario of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket to get them to do the right thing. But yeah, you can get your information, but you've got to know the law, you've got to know how to push, and you've got to know how to be flexible.
Yeah, I wanted to interrupt again, Damien. I totally agree with what you're saying. And I wanted to let people know years ago when I first started filing these right to know requests, there was an attorney at the Attorney General's office who I would call up, and I can't remember his name now, but if there was a problem, he would, with a community not turning over required documents, he would behind the scenes call them up and say, you know what, you're not following the law. The Attorney General's office used to, at least informally, enforce that law before it had to go to court. And that position is long gone. Thanks.
Nancy, let me ask you this, though. Do you think that New Hampshire citizens are even aware that they have a right to request government records?
I think more are finding out now than before, ever before. I think, the fact that in 2 years, the ombudsman office had 95 decisions, that's just people who were, you know, angry enough or steadfast enough and, had the wherewithal to really push it further than just complaining like I do.
That sounds like a good number. But back to Damien for a quick second here. Could you share an example of a story or an investigation that you were working on that would not have been possible without the right to know law request that you submitted?
You're asking me for details.
Just give me a case. Give me just a case.
Oh, well, I mean, there are a lot. I think if we go back to most recently, and this had to go to the Supreme Court, but getting the information about John Stone in Claremont, the former police officer, that started as a right to know request. Samuel Provenza, was it in Canaan, I think? That started as a right to know request to get the information on him. I have currently, I've got a right to know request along a similar line out. And the town clerk sent me a sort of a complicated, convoluted email about how they respond to it in that community, which isn't like I've seen anywhere else, but you take what you find and you go with that.
Yeah. And at least you got a response from them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you say, you all are almost teaching them. The onus is on you to let them know how to do it, which seems kind of backwards, but.
Well, you have to know what the law is, what the rules are, because you'll have to push it if you need to. I used to cover a courthouse with another reporter who knew everything, knew the law, and he could never get information out of the clerks. But I could go in and talk to the clerks like a human, and I would get whatever I wanted. It's just you've got to be able to do that as well.
And that goes back to Paula's comments that it's relationships that you develop that help you expedite this information that you need. Thank you so much, Damien. Thank you, Nancy.
Yep, you heard it. Damien Fisher is lecturing how people don't really follow the rules in journalism. Oh my God. Now, let's compare that to reality. Stacey Brown brings forward a legitimate question: misappropriation of funds. Real numbers, real concern. You think that becomes the story. You think the response would be, let's dig into that. Instead, the response comes back, hey, do you have any dirt on Claire? That's the pivot. And that's the pivot from follow the money to follow the person. And that's not a small shift. That's the story changing direction in real time. So let's talk about something personal. And I'm going to say this plainly. It is incredibly easy to write about someone and get it completely wrong. But what matters is what you do. Now, when you're given the actual information, because at some point, this stops looking like journalism and starts looking like a New England sewing circle. Same names, same narratives, same stories getting stitched together. And yes, Damian Fisher at New Hampshire Journal has written about all three of us. There's an article about me titled, Good Grief, Progressive New Hampshire Activist Busted Over Dead Mom's Ballot. My mother had just passed away. And that moment, that grief became a headline. That's not just reporting, that's packaging. That's taking something deeply human and turning it into something clickable. Judge, jury, executioner, shame on you. Because there's a line, and when you take someone's grief and turn it into a headline like that, you've crossed it. You never once called me or verified your source. So this isn't about me being upset about coverage. This is a pattern, because when you see it happen to you, you start to recognize it happening to others. The framing, the tone, the narrative already set. So now the question isn't just what happened. It's how was this story told and why? Because during Sunshine Week, we're supposed to be talking about sunlight, open records, public accountability, following the facts, not deciding the story first and filling in the details later. That's not sunlight. That's shadow. That's lazy journalism. That's just stupid. And here's what's happening now, because people are starting to check, reading documents, comparing claims, asking questions. And when things don't line up, trust starts to crack piece by piece, line by line, story by story. Because if journalism is supposed to hold power accountable, who holds the journalist accountable? And if we can't trust the people telling the story, what exactly are we reading? Next, we follow the money.
You've got to know how to push, and you've got to know how to be flexible.
Yeah, I wanted to